Hi, it's Peter Schweitzer, and welcome to the Drill Down. Well, they really are coming for you. And we've got big spending in Washington, D.C. We've got hidden campaign donations. We're going to cover all of that with the king of oversight, who is our special guest today. The co-host of this program, of course, is Eric Eggers. Eric, how are you?
I'm excellent, but I'm excited to learn from our very special guest, somebody that we've worked with for some time, former Representative Jason Chaffetz, about who's coming for whom and how scared should we be. The cover of his book, which is excellent, by the way, is frightening.
Yeah, it is frightening. And Jason has a new book out. He was also, while he was in Congress, the chairman of the House Oversight Committee. He's the head of the Oversight Project, which has been affiliated with the Heritage Foundation. And he is a distinguished fellow at GAI. We want to talk about this new book, Jason. We want to talk about what's going on in Washington. So here's the question. You've written a great book. It's got a lot of detailed information. And a lot of people are going to be thinking, well, Trump's taking care of this, right? We've got DOJ. We've got all these sorts of people in Washington that are taking care of these issues. You actually raise a bunch of questions that have yet to be addressed in Washington, D.C., specifically about how they're coming for your information and your privacy. Explain that and why people should actually care about their privacy.
Well, listen, thanks for having me on. Look, key is to first stop feeding the beast, and DOJ did that. They started to highlight and cut the spending that was going out to so many of these nefarious organizations. But for far too long, unfortunately, our data has not had that same sort of spigot cut off. And this data has been, it's amazing to me. Like you start with the premise, you go, and then at the end of the book, you look back and you think, oh my gosh, I had no idea of the breadth and gravity of how data is being used to manipulate what you see, where you go, what you can do, how to manipulate elections. And that's what scares me. That's why I wrote this book. They're coming for you because they're going to use that data against you, try to cut you off from banking, try to give you essentially a social credit score. It's how they track you. It's how they follow you. It's how they find their preferred voters to go out and vote for the Democratic candidates. And that's the reality of what's happening today.
So why is it scary? Because I'm old enough to remember when Barack Obama won his reelection in 2012 and Eric Schmidt, the former head of Google, helped kind of co-chair that campaign. And they basically bragged about what you just said. They said we have 5,000 points of data on everybody. It was hailed as sophisticated, and this is what the future of smart politics looks like. How do we go from, okay, this is just what modern campaign looks like, to something I think, to your point, is much more nefarious?
Well, I think most people understand they trade a little bit of privacy in order to have some convenience on their phone. But we've also probably all had that experience where if you're talking to somebody about getting a new couch, then suddenly every ad that populates on your phone is about a couch. But it is more nefarious in that they, like, let me give you an example. It starts when you're a very young person and the new generation is growing up in a whole different world. But I didn't know, for instance, it used to be in Florida that when you went to go get your driver's license and think about all the information, let's say you have a 16-year-old daughter, in my case, and they go and they're going to get name, address, height, weight, eye color, does she wear glasses, all of that information. Well, the state of Florida used to sell that information. What do you mean sell it? They were selling it to data brokers. Then you have groups like Clearview AI. I'm not saying they did anything illegal. I'm just saying that they have mastered scraping the internet. That is going out there, and anytime you post anything with your picture on it, they grab it. So it can be on your Venmo, it can be on social media, it can be wherever you might post a photo, LinkedIn, all of this. They scrape that. And then they're able to take that and build an even bigger profile about you. Now, law enforcement, you have to have probable cause. You have to have as articulable suspicion to go out and dive into somebody's background before you go investigating them, because we have a right to privacy in this country. But they've taken a position that if they buy the data, which is about a $400 billion a year industry, then it's fair game. So they'll just sell the data. On the back end, they'll buy the data. It's why in the case of Joe Biden, they spent more than $500,000, I think, in the first week out of the White House having a relationship with Clearview AI. So they had access to all these tens of billions of photos. But why did they do that? And then you take an executive order like 14019, which Joe Biden signed in March of the year he was elected, and you start to realize they're leveraging all of the physical and assets and personnel within the federal apparatus to target people to get out the vote. And so I can expand from there, but it gets really seedy really fast, and most people are oblivious to it.
Yeah, we're talking with Jason Chaffetz, author of They're Coming for You, How Deep State Spies, NGOs, and woke corporations plan to push you out of the economy. And Jason, I think the part that is perhaps the scariest in your subtitle to me are the deep state spies. I mean, some of the biggest consumers, buyers of this government information is actually the government itself. So what extent do you think that the Trump administration has grasped the magnitude of this information problem? And have they done anything to address it? Or is the problem still lingering out there, not addressed at all?
Look, the Trump administration is starting to cut off these spigots of information. The problem is so much of it is that genie's already left the bottle. So Barack Obama, for instance, really put this into overdrive. You had Operation Choke Point. You had the Biden administration, for instance, going after anybody that was in the meat and dairy business, anybody that was a Trump supporter. They had key words at the IRS, and that is they would force the banking institutions to go out, and if you shopped at Cabela's, if you purchased a gun, if you bought a MAGA hat, if you did, then you were on this watch list. And remember, they pushed Melania and Barron Trump out. They just cut them off. They cited reputational risk. If there's too much of a reputational risk, then as a bank, we don't or shouldn't do business with you. And so they went after firearms dealers. They went after Christians. They went after a lot of different groups and cut them off from their ability to participate in the economy. And essentially what they were doing is assigning a social credit score. And if you weren't part of the woke few, then you had things that were happening. And we're talking about from Wells Fargo to JP Morgan Chase to US Bank, right on to PayPal, got sideways with PayPal, Moms for Liberty got sideways with PayPal. All of these types of things were based in the law, and they're the regulators, and there's no way to adjudicate that and get your good name back. But my goodness, if you shop at Cabela's, you might buy a gun, and that might be somebody we don't want to do business with.
So the people that are listening to this, they're like, okay, we don't want that to happen to us. We don't want deep state spies coming after us. And they're maybe not feeling like super optimistic because you're like, well, it's too late. So your information has been bought and sold by the people that you give your tax dollars to run this country. So I guess what advice would you have for somebody now that says, all right, I'd like to exempt out of this, but everyone's got a phone. Most people have a social media account. Most people are engaged in e-commerce. So what is your big picture bottom line? Look, if you want to stop this thing from happening to you, then you should do this.
Well, first of all, that's why I wrote the book. They're coming for you. You got to be aware of it and cognizant of it. You can't just put your head in the sand and say, I don't do anything wrong, so what does it matter anyway? Because they are going to come for you. They're going to make things more expensive for you, whether it be insurance and everything else. I mean, I can keep going down the list of all the bad things that happen. I think there's going to need to be some legislation. I do think you're going to have to get to the point where you have the right to be forgotten. This is not an original thought of mine, but I think if you enter into a contract where you trade your personal information for access to this social network, there has to be an ability at some point to stop that contract. I know of nothing else in the law where once you enter into contract, you can never leave. It's like that Hotel California song. You have to be able to, particularly as a minor, we're allowing 13-year-olds enter into a contract. But at what point can they say, look, I don't want to have my data sold and monetized anymore because I'm going to stop using your services. Right now, we can't do that. And so then you end up having people like Senator Whitehouse, wrote to the IRS commissioner at one point and said, hey, anybody associated with Turning Point USA, they need to get audited or something to that effect. I mean, it was really nefarious to highlight with the IRS commissioner that, hey, these people are the ones that we should be going after. And if you don't do that, then I just think you have a fundamental right to privacy in this country. And you can't, this stuff shouldn't be used against you in perpetuity. But that's what's happening. It's why the Biden administration asked for, remember when they asked for $104 billion, 8 times its annual budget? This is what they were doing. They were going to go after people on their naughty list, the woke list.
Well, Jason's written a terrific book. They're coming for you. Explain to the audience what Vote.ER is.
Vote.ER started this. Oh, look how sweet and nice this is. Because what we're going to do is we want to get people registered to vote. That's always the way it starts, right? This is our laudable goal. Well, this person who started Vote.ER did it under that guise, but unfortunately, they got 50,000 physicians and doctors. And what they did over the course of time, remember, these are medical professionals, and they're targeting people in the hospital. So presumably a lot of them are under sedation or some sort of medication. And what we found is that the Tides Foundation, the Open Society Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they saw this as a great opportunity. So they ended up getting 50,000 physicians in 700 hospitals. And while you were in the bed, and some of them were psychiatric patients at psychiatric hospitals, right? They literally registered them to vote. Now, remember, once they know who you are and that you've registered to vote now, then they can extrapolate out all these other data points, and they can take a really good educated guess. These are Democrats, these are Republicans. And they went through this. I mean, see, the idea that they used this Epic system software, they recorded their status. And again, they're the doctor showing up saying, stick your tongue out. I am going to inject you with this. Oh, by the way, sign this piece of paper and let's register to vote. And then they took that information, for instance, in Kansas, when they had the abortion debate, they sent out 65,000 texts in favor of the position that they wanted, which was the Democratic position. And this is the type of things. So forget HIPAA laws and all your privacy laws. You may not even know this has happened because you may have been sedated. That one was absolutely outrageous to me.
So here's the irony to me, Jason, of what you're talking about, because you're talking about something that's highly sophisticated and highly granular, right? We're talking about collecting a data profile that's very specific. And, you write these books now, you expose these problems, but you previously, when you're in Congress, you served as the chair of the House Oversight Committee. And one of the things that I think it's happening that people need to be paying attention to right now is the House Oversight Committee is doing an investigation into ActBlue, and they've just subpoenaed 2 of their officials because they're looking into potentially money laundering and the kind of fraudulent donations, which is predicated on the opposite of what you're describing. Like you're talking about, hey, specific data. We know exactly what's happening with these people in the hospital bed. ActBlue's like, I don't know. He's got a name and address and the money's coming in. And so I guess, like, what's your assessment of when you see something like this? Here's another process that benefits Democrats largely, but it's based on the idea that, well, it's impossible for us to keep track of the data. And as long as they provide an address and the money comes in, then kind of we don't care. I guess, how big of a deal do you think that is? And just like now knowing what you know about how much information is out there, what's your assessment of this ActBlue possible scandal, and what do you think they should do about it from a position of somebody who used to be able to do something about it on the House Oversight Committee?
Well, I don't believe that they're that naive. Look, money laundering usually is done by a lot of people who maybe not so clever and smart as they think they are. But there can also be others who understand how to use those data points, and they don't want to be associated with it. So if you wanted to move money past federal limits, I'm not saying that they did, I'm just saying hypothetically, then you would have to do so with intent to bypass the law and the legal limits. If you wanted to keep somebody, quote unquote, clean, and you wanted to make sure that they weren't highlighted, but you wanted to identify them as a particular voter. I'm just telling you the technology exists right now here today. I highlight one of those in the book. They're coming for you, where some MIT students with less than $200 got a pair of glasses, some artificial intelligence. And by the way, I'm here in Times Square. Meta, in conjunction with Ray-Ban, is promoting this. Okay, they're promoting this. You put on the glasses. It's connected through artificial intelligence, and it can do that facial recognition instantly. So you can walk down the street, somebody you've actually physically never met before, and you can say, "Oh, Joe Jones, how are you?" And then it'll tell you that Joe is a professor of anthropology at Duke. And you can say, "Hey, aren't you at Duke? I think I read your paper about the Brontosaurus." And they go through and they chronicle how they do this. They believe there are people out there that are studying people's gait, like how they walk, studying their faces, and they believe with an 80% accuracy, they can tell whether or not you're gay or straight, whether or not you're Republican or Democrat. I mean, and that's where we are today. Imagine how creepy it's going to get. And then you combine on that with deep fakes. I think if they're claiming, in this case, just totally naive, "Oh, we didn't know people were putting their money in," that's not a really good excuse, because my guess, total guess, maybe it's unfair, but total guess is they've got a lot more information, because they can match up your facial recognition with all these other data points they get, not just from retailers, but from the government. And think about it. The government has all of the resources to tell who's on welfare, who gets assistance checks, who's on Medicaid, who's on Medicare, who's on Social Security. But they give those to the Democrats. They're giving them to Republicans.
So to be clear, when you say they're coming for you, what you really mean is they're coming for the dating services, which are now obsolete, because you can put on a pair of glasses, you can see someone's sexual preference and know all kinds of personal information about them, and you can decide whether you want to swipe left or right. I get it. That's terrifying.
Eric, you have no chance. Move on. That's what it
what this means is anytime somebody comes up and they're wearing Ray-Ban glasses and they act like they know me, I'm going to be like, "Take those glasses off first, and then let me ask you some questions." We're talking with Jason Chaffetz, a former member of Congress. He's got a terrific new book out called "They're Coming for You." I highly recommend it. And this seems to be the paradox, what we've been talking about. There is so much precise information out there. There's this massive industries you highlight in the book to sell information about you. And as Thomas Jefferson reminded us, to the extent they can do something for you, they can do something to you, so they can weaponize this. So you've got all this information, and yet when it comes to Washington, D.C., it's all obscure. It's all vague. In ActBlue, well, we don't really necessarily have all that data. In terms of budget spending in Congress, you've got this big, beautiful bill right now that's being debated. I think there's a lot of good things in it. But, Jason, it's just surprising to me, given all the data points you said that are out there, there's not a lot of substantial data about what the bill actually does and the implications of it. So talk a little bit about your assessment of the bill in light of the book that you've written and what it means in terms of trust or distrust in our government.
Well, the one big, beautiful bill, I mean, I would vote for it. I think there's more positive than negative. Of course, there's things that I wish I'd get rid of. I wish I could cut more spending, do this, that, and the other. But on the whole, understanding that you got to get to a majority with, 50 senators and 218 Republicans in the House, not everybody is fiscally conservative as I am. So a lot of these issues are going to be playing out at the state level. Like, for instance, I highlighted the idea of what's going on in the state of Florida. Now, Florida is one of the best run, most conservative states. I love Ron DeSantis. I think he's one of the most effective governors out there. But even they were taking data and brokering it and selling it because they have this insatiable desire for revenue. Even though they're charging you for these driver's licenses, you're still selling the data on the back end. So I think that it's an open-ended question on how much is out there and how. What I was concerned, and I did this while I was in Congress, we had multiple hearings on cell phone simulator towers. The IRS had 4 of the so-called stingrays. You had other non-law enforcement agencies buying these so that I can buy data right now. You give me the name of anybody, I can create a geofence around that person, and through a data broker, I can tell you everybody who came in within 100 feet of that spot over the last 60 days. And I don't think most people know that's just, and it's not just government, right? What about the Sinaloa cartel? You can see why ICE is covering their face, right? Because the drug cartels know if they can get that face, they can find that person. They can find the person, they can get their mobile phone. They get their mobile phone, then they can find out when an operation's going down. That's the scary part where we live today.
No, that's terrifying. So is your prediction then, as we kind of watch it, well, let me back up, because part of what this whole Trump administration's been is about restoring some level of fiscal sanity. Are you suggesting that we may struggle with this at the federal level? Like, we may want to sell data at the federal level because it could be a revenue stream and it's one way to offset some of these other spending things they may do? Or is that only happening at the state level as far as you're aware?
Well, I think the revenue is tempting for agencies that want to recover it. And it is, like I said, nearly a $400 billion a year industry. More importantly, I think there's greater value in the actual data themselves. So, for instance, one of the chapters here, we dive into how automobiles are basically rolling computers.
Yeah.
You know how much data they collect from that stuff? I mean, that is far more valuable to Elon Musk than just about anything, because they can tell what you're listening to, how often you turn your head to look in the rearview mirror. Insurance companies want that information. How fast do you drive? How slow do you drive? How often do you drive? Where do you drive? Oh, you're going to a cancer clinic. You might have cancer. So we're going to change the rates. In California right now, if you get a speeding ticket, they will charge you a different rate based on what they believe your income is. So if you're making Peter Schweitzer money, you're paying a lot. You making Eric Eggers money, you may let you go because they're feeling, we don't want to charge that destitute guy.
Ironically, I drive so much faster than him, so actually it works out. I would get so mad, bro. Okay, right lane, Ricky, come on, man, let's do something. But it is crazy, though. I mean, you're absolutely right. And here's the point of it is, as you're a consumer, like I have a friend who's got a kid who just turned 16. Back to your point. And they just did, I won't say the name of the company, but they have a snapshot app that you download and they monitor your driving for, I think it's like 45 days. And then they tell you what your rate is based on them having access to everything that you do in the car. And then because, insurance companies like actuarial data, they like to, so consumers opt into this premise, and that's a choice you can make. But your point is they're doing it even without your permission, and it's not just insurance companies, it's not just car companies, like people all over the place are doing that, and they're controlling your life without you knowing it.
Yeah, as best I can tell, the best number I could come up with, there's about 537,000 public cameras out there. And the most surveilled people live in Atlanta, Washington, D.C., and Philadelphia. I mean, Atlanta has 124 cameras for every 1,000 people. So that's a lot of cameras. And by the way, I think this is, maybe I should have led with this because it creates the picture here. As private citizens in the United States, they know everything about us. But the public sector, the government, we know almost nothing about what they do. So they're so opaque. And yet we're so transparent, but we're oblivious. It gets that other piece of legislation, the right to be forgotten. I think there needs to be better declaration in terms of what information do they gather. And much like they revamped how we do food labeling in this country, which I think needs to be redone with RFK Jr. and the whole Maha movement. But I think as a consumer, you need to know who's monitoring, who's selling, who's monetizing. I mean, if people understood what Google does, I don't know that anybody would use Google, because there's a whole chapter in the book about what they do with kids. They hand out free computers, and parents, I'm sure, save $1,000, say, hey, great, they gave Junior here a computer. But they're taking all of that data, all that video, all the test scores, everything, and they're creating a profile. They make money doing that. They don't just give it out for the goodness of their health. They monetize that.
Yeah, it's like it's been said before about Google. With Google, you are the product. People always wonder, what is Google's product? You are the product. That is what they are selling. So let's look at the issue here of attitudes about privacy. It seems to me that, I'm 60. It seems people that are, let's say, of older generations are more concerned about privacy. I know a lot of people in their 20s that don't seem to care. I don't care what the companies know about me. I don't care what the government knows about me, because I don't have anything to hide, and they're just going to give me more options, right? They're going to give me ads that I want. They're going to give me prompts that I want. Jason, talk to those younger generations and explain why they should be concerned about privacy. They know the good thing about data collection, which is, it does give you the kind of ads and products you're interested in. On the other hand, there's a darker side. Explain that darker side to those people.
Well, the model that we looked at is really China, because China has taken it to the extreme, but it's a place that we could go to really quickly, because whether or not you're the chosen one or you're doing something they believe is favorable, they're going to charge you different rates. They're going to give you access. It's going to limit your travel. It'll change how you pay for things, or can you even purchase those things? That's already happening, whether you're oblivious to it or not. And again, you got kids just plowing through, and not just kids, adults too, plowing through social media. That profile, it's scary. And what they're doing with deep fakes, the ability to manipulate what you see and hear, that's pretty scary. And it's hard to instill an appreciation of privacy until you've really been burned by it. But you're going to get burned by it when it's far too late. And I wish there was a smart, easy way to say, fire, danger, beware. But at this generation, I think it's much more important to be socially acceptable and laugh and get that, quick. How quickly you move through Instagram and they hit that little heart button and just next. That is going to be used against you in every way, shape, or form. What you pay, how you do things, how you live your life, and they're going to create a social score for you, and it's scary.
Yeah, to Peter Schweitzer's point, the 20-year-olds don't have a problem with it yet because they haven't really faced any consequences for it. Yeah. The future that Jason Chaffetz is laying out, which I think is very real, is one of consequences that have yet to be realized. And I know, we did a film together a few years ago. It's called The Creepy Line, and it talks about a lot of these topics. And one of the points that was made in it is that there's always a lag between when a technology is introduced and the government's ability to correctly figure out how it should be regulated, right? Cars existed for 60 years before seatbelts were introduced. Chemicals existed for a long time that you would just pour in the river before the EPA was invented, right, or established. So I think, to your point, the data exists. These companies have figured out how to make a lot of money on it, and the government, ironically, is lagging very far behind in terms of how to protect the people who create this data from the entities, which include the government, from taking advantage of it to the citizens' detriment, right? And that's, I think, one of the reasons why this book's so important. So thank you for doing this. And we wish you the best of luck, because it's a very, very important topic. Ironically, you could say fire, danger, warning, and those tech companies would censor it. So,
yeah.
Well, we appreciate Jason joining us. His terrific new book is called They're Coming for You: How Deep State Spies, NGOs, and Woke Corporations Plan to Push You Out of the Economy. I read a lot of books. I highly recommend this one. It's got a lot of information you have not heard of before, a lot of detail that is going to shock you. And we appreciate you, the audience, for taking the time to listen to this podcast. We know your time is valuable. You can find out more about the research we do at thedrilldown.com. And of course, you can subscribe to this podcast, which we would very much appreciate.
We would tell you to like it, but we know that would just be held against you down the line.
Right, exactly. Thank you again. Until next time.